My name is Sean Owens, and this is the oral defense for PS 620, Transnational Crime and Corruption, Bellevue University, Professor Dr. Matthew Croston. My final article focuses on the collaboration and the growing partnership between radical Islamic groups and organized crime entities in Latin America. More specifically, we will look at the threat and prescriptions related to known terror groups leveraging the narcotics trafficking efforts of criminal cartels in Central and South America. This paper takes an in-depth look at the threat created by these partnerships from both the perspectives of the United States and of Latin America. We'll review and critique the efforts of the United States, the United Nations, and groups from within Latin America as to how well they are currently addressing these threats. Finally, we will make policy suggestions by considering academic prescriptions, success stories from elsewhere in the globe for dealing with similar threats, and by creating new suggestions based on the overall success and failures of current efforts. The threat related to the partnership between radical Islamic groups and criminal cartels in Latin America is fostered by the decline of traditional state sponsorship of terrorism. Radical groups look to lucrative economic gains for participating in the narcotic trafficking. We see that Muslim population in Latin America is increasing, that Hezbollah, Hamas, and Al-Qaeda are expanding their footprint and leveraging the disenfranchised within that population. Terrorism is a primary concern of the American people, and the perception that the southern border of the United States is vulnerable remains very high. Also at risk is the economic value of the bilateral trade and investment, both from the U.S. and from the countries of Latin America. U.S. policies are aimed at or created due to weak and or corrupt institutes within Latin America that allow for these relationships to flourish in the first place. We see the efforts of the United States are primarily focused on two areas. First is the war on drugs, led by the DEA, which attempts to minimize the financial power of the drug cartels, and it also focuses on the supply side, or the production and distribution of drugs. Critics feel that this focus on demand has only pushed production into harder to govern areas and has only made trafficking that much more profitable for the criminal cartels. Meanwhile, we see that the war on terrorism is being led by the United Nations and the United States military. Here, the focus is on local law enforcement and governments, teaching and providing counterinsurgency and anti-terrorism training, and, again, trying to attack the financial backers of terrorism or terrorism activities. Both these efforts are criticized for their lack of success and the high cost associated with executing, and the incentives provided to the population by criminals often outweigh the more legitimate opportunities. When we look at the Latin American policies, we focus on the Organization of the American States, or the OAS. The OAS is the oldest regional organization, and its charter has been ratified by all 35 independent states of the Americas. The OAS is focused on preventing financing of terror groups, at strengthening border controls, and at increasing the cooperation between law enforcement agencies in different countries. What we see is that the OAS has issues with challenges related to accountability, as the sovereignty of each nation is protected, and also because the OAS often lacks the accountability measures or oversight. For example, it only takes a few nations, such as Venezuela or Colombia, who are willing to circumvent the processes or practices instituted by the OAS, which will allow the radical groups to enter and even to flourish within the region. Many places around the globe are dealing with similar challenges of trying to mitigate the threat of radical Islamic groups gaining footholds and proliferating within their regions. Most areas have realized that it is the radical element that poses a threat and not simply the presence of a Muslim community. In the United Kingdom, for example, we have seen successes where the funding and encouraging of legitimate Islamic organizations occurs at both the regional and local governments. The idea is that the more invested and part of the community the Muslim population is, the more that they can influence or combat the radicalism from within. We also see areas in West Africa where the United States' military is partnering with regional law enforcement and local military. We're providing arms and basic training on counterinsurgency and anti-terrorism. But again, challenges occur when organized crime or terrorist groups can offer the average citizen bribes and incentives far greater than they can earn via legitimate means to participate in the criminal activity or simply to look the other way. When we look at the academic prescriptions and what scholars are saying about the collaboration between radical Islamic groups and organized criminal cartels, we see that traditionally the two groups are viewed The two groups of radicalism or terrorism and organized crime or criminal activity are viewed as unique from a scholarly or academic perspective. When they are studied in conjunction or together, the primary focus is on what makes them different or unique. However, recent academic work is focusing on the similarities between these two activities and the people that make up these groups. We see that the academic world is prescribing or suggesting that we start to include more qualitative approaches in modeling to enhance the quantitative approaches in order to stop or even prevent the partnerships from occurring. So finally, when we look at the prescriptions made in this paper wholly, we focus on uniting the efforts of the war on drugs and the war on terror. The groups that are fighting these wars or efforts could share resources and intelligence and improve both intra and interstate efforts. We take the prescriptions from the academic world of studying the people that participate in these activities and suggest adding both the qualitative and quantitative measures to try and proactively prevent this from occurring in the first place. And then we focus on prescriptions related to offsetting the incentives of participation by increasing the legitimate opportunities. For example, if we take the money spent on this war on drugs or war on terror and take some of that towards increasing trade and on addressing the corruption that allows the crime to flourish in the first place, perhaps we can prevent the radicalism from gaining strength and have opportunities to combat the criminal cartels. Thank you.